What is up, YouTube? Live via satellite here, and today we are talking Kingdom, Manga chapter 535. Now, before we get into this week's chapter, guys, we have some things to discuss because, man, I got the funniest comment I've ever read in a while. And it was funny because it was like, it called me out. It called me out and it put me on the spot. It was too funny because I'm sitting here and I just realized that for the last few weeks, I've been walking around looking like Virgo. If you don't remember Virgo, man, in One Piece, man, he used to always walk around and he had something like stuck to his face. Everybody saw it, but nobody really commented about it. You know, they kind of just, hey, he's got something on his face. It's Virgo. That's just what it is. Who cares? So finally, someone let me know. There was something on my face. And I was like, all right, I got to address it. I have to address it in the next review. So here we are. And the comment that was said was this. My man Aminu, he comments from time to time. You know, he drops a little line here and there. And he let me know. Look, is it Moten or is it Moten? LOL. And for a second, I was like, what's this guy? What's he talking about? And then I realized it. I realized what I have been doing. I have been legit dropping the T in Moutens' name for like, oh shit, just to see, look, I just did it again. I have been legit dropping the T in Moutens' name for like a couple of reviews now. And I didn't realize it. I had no clue I was doing it until just now. So now I have to break this bad habit that I came up with. It's going to be tough. It is going to be tough. But it was perfect timing because guess what? Now it's time to put respect on Moutens. Oh, jeez. Now it's time to put respect on Moutens' name. This is going to be a hard review, guys. All right, so the chapter starts out giving us basically a flashback right before sunset. And it picks up with the mountain tribe, and we actually get to see Baggio facing off against some members of the Quan Rong. And they're actually giving him a little bit of a run for his money. But being as the sun set and everybody's getting hungry and about to withdraw. But the one guy Baggio is fighting threatens him, saying that he will remember his mask the next day. Then we get a brief Heki cameo, and we get to see that he is unscathed. And he suggests that his men hurry to get a quick count of how many casualties they've had. Then we get over to Yotanwa, and we see that she's looking over the battlefield. But as she's looking over the battlefield, the King of Figo starts creeping up from behind. And as he's strolling up on his horse, he's talking about how it's the first day of battle, but yet death has claimed so many. And for some reason, he sees this as a perfect opportunity to serenade Yotanwa by saying that the sight of her amidst this blood-drenched battlefield never fails to. But before he can finish, Yotanwa cuts him off, saying, "Do not speak to me. I am in a foul mood." The King of Figo just doesn't realize there are certain times you just do not speak to women.
I can't believe you did that. I fucking told you not to. A long time ago, you better erase it.
And then we get our first glimpse of the people of Gyo, and we realize that these guys are actually starving. And we see the parents trying to comfort their children, letting them know that there'll be more food the next day. The interesting thing here is that we're actually starting to see Ousens' plans coming into fruition the first night, because now we are already starting to see his plan to starve Gyo out is actually beginning to work. And I'm very curious to see how the citizens will begin to revolt or react to all of this hunger. But right outside, hunger does not seem to be a problem for Kanki and his men, as they're pretty much feasting. And it's actually brought up that one of the great things about battle is that there's always plenty of horse meat to make meals from. And apparently, Marin is one of the best cooks in the Kanki army, because even Raido and Kokuo come there for Marin's cooking. Raido even decides to throw a jab at Kokuo, saying that he would rather eat his food raw than to have her cook it for him. Which just tells us that Kokuo is a woman of many talents, but cooking just isn't one of them.
You couldn't even do the kids' hair. Really bad. Couldn't even do the laundry. Couldn't even do the dishes. Really? You know a man expects dinner when you get off work. Come on now. I mean, you gonna do something around here?
Oh, Nana, why you gotta act so naughty?
Then we actually get to see Kanki interacting with his men because he's asking them what they actually thought about the first day. Initially, Raito was complaining about how they had it pretty rough, and as soon as they squashed one enemy, another one came right back up. But after a while, he started to realize that it was doable because he said, since the different groups don't seem to work together, it's pretty easy to take them out one by one. Kokuo agrees that if they work together it would be more of an issue, but she also says that they still have their secret weapon, the Xenoclan, up their sleeve. But Raito does caution that if Riboku or somebody else came up with a huge force, that they wouldn't last a minute against something like that. And Marin agrees. And it was very interesting to see what they actually brought up here about Riboku showing up. It kind of almost seems like foreshadowing what may actually happen in the future. And especially since we already seen Riboku actually make a play like this, could this be Riboku's next major move? Because just as easily as they realized the fact that if another big force were to come, they'd be wiped out, I'm sure Riboku knows this fact as well. But Raito also asks if they've heard any news from Ousens. But Kanki lets him know that they wouldn't send him news over every little thing that happened, and that Raito is too much of a worrywart. So back over at the Gyokuho unit's campgrounds, they find out that Mako has been slain. But not only that he's been slain, but he was actually slain by Riboku himself. Finding out that they lost their commander Mako, many people assumed that they would have withdrawn from their position. But here's where they find out not only did they not withdraw, they were actually able to hold their positions due to the fact that Mouten took command of Mako's army, which allowed them to hang on. And Ohan looks absolutely thrilled to hear of the success of his comrades. Kanjo and Shutaku discuss that even though the left wing was saved, it still seems like Ousens is in a pretty bad position here after the first day, because it seems like he wanted to accomplish something in the left wing, but Riboku was able to pretty much turn the tables on him, and that losing his left-hand man is still a huge mental blow to Ousens. But Ohan jumps in saying that Kanjo knows nothing of Ousens, because Ousens doesn't see the loss of an officer as nothing more than the loss of a single pawn. And it is for this reason that he has so many officers gathered up in the center army, because if he loses an officer, all he needs to do is simply replace him with another pawn. And that Ousens has given up such needless things as emotions so that he can make cold calculations to yield the most efficient results. And that is the man known as Ousens, and that he will not crumble as easily as you believe. Kanjo says that he knows all that. The point he was just trying to make was that now it's going to be hard to beat the left wing back into shape, especially against an opponent like Kishui. But Banyo chimes in and says what Ohan's trying to say is that they need not concern themselves with it. All they need to do is trust in Ousens to make the right decisions. Back over to Shin and Mouten, we find out that the reason Mouten was unconscious when Shin found him was because he fell off his horse and bumped his head. And Shin thinks that this is so lame, and I have to agree with Shin here because there aren't many things lamer than knocking yourself out. But then they are interrupted by the officers of Mako's army coming to give Mouten their sincerest thanks for stepping in and saving the lives of the Mako army. But Mouten was curious to know whether the men were angry at him for pretty much telling them lies that Mako was still living. But then they tell Mouten that anyone who had the nerve to speak up about the trick he used to keep them alive, they were met with an iron fist. Everyone's shocked by this, but he then says that it was just a joke. Everyone was pretty much just appreciative of what Mouten was able to do for them. And now the men are even more fired up to try to avenge Mako's death. Shin then asks what's the plan going forward, because not only have they lost their commander, they've also lost their tacticians and advisors. One of the commanders says that Ousens should be on his way with some form of aid, because even though they were able to hang on today, they're in no shape to continue fighting for the next days, and that they're going to need to reorganize and come up with a new plan to follow. And he brings up that in the center army, they still have other generals like Denrimi-sama and So-sama, and that he's sure one of them would be arriving shortly. But then Shin says the way he sees it, it wouldn't be a bad idea for Mouten to stay here and take command. But Mouten then quickly shuts that down with a barrage of excuses, saying that he doesn't have the experience to lead such a large force, especially the Mako army, which he knows so little about, and that pretty much they just happened to get lucky on the first day. And lastly, that Kishu is not the type of opponent you want to use such a risky plan on. But as Mouten is talking, a messenger from HQ arrives, bringing word from Ousens. And Ousens pretty much says that he has nothing but praise for the left wing for not collapsing after the death of Mako, and that to Mouten, who was able to rally the men of Mako and take control midway through the battle, he has his utmost gratitude. But he says the rank of a 5,000-man commander is insufficient for the burden of leadership in such a grand battle, and that in the light of this unexpected situation, he invokes his special rights as Supreme Commander and temporarily elevates Moutens to the rank of general for the remainder of the campaign, and that he will also be granted total control of the left wing to use as he sees fit. And everyone is shocked by this news, including Shin, who literally falls out of his chair, which is pure karma because he was so calling Moutens lame at the beginning of the chapter, and he's looking pretty lame himself right now. So back to the center army, we see that Ousens is standing there with one of his officers, and one of his officers happens to be questioning whether Ousens is sure about the left wing. And Ousens says that even though Moutens is young, his acumen on the battlefield is already to the point where it can interfere with him and Riboku. But here, Ousens also lets him know that the left is not the side you need to worry about, because from tomorrow onwards, the one that will be lighting the fire will be the right wing. Then we just see Ohan sitting there not realizing that he's about to be the star of the show. And that was a chapter in a nutshell, guys, and this chapter of Kingdom was excellent. Kingdom rarely ever disappoints, and even in a transitional chapter, they still managed to bring the hype. In one chapter, we managed to see what was going on with the Mountain Tribe, Kanki, Ousens in the center, Ohan's group receiving the news about Mako, and Moutens being promoted to general. I don't know how you squeeze all of that into one chapter, but somehow Hera managed to do it. But I definitely want to start out talking about everything we learned about Ousens in this chapter. And to know that he just pretty much sees his men as pawns and that everyone is replaceable, that to me is a big difference between Riboku and Ousens. Because Riboku actually seems to care about the soldiers and officers underneath him, and now we see that Ousens is pretty much cold and emotionless. And after hearing all of this about Ousens, it actually made it feel kind of fake when a messenger was delivering all the gratitudes to Moutens and the men of Mako. It actually made me see these words as just another tool that Ousens uses to get the desired effect, and that he really had no sincerity in anything that was being said. In fact, I feel that this is kind of backed up by him putting everything on Moutens' shoulders in the left wing so that he can fully focus on his plans for the right wing. And speaking of those plans, I kind of think that Ousens may use some of those generals that we were hearing about in this chapter as reinforcements for the right wing. Because currently, I think they're pretty much outnumbered with just Ohan and Akko going up against Bananji, Gakui, and Choguryu. So I'm very interested to see what type of play he has there. The second thing I really found interesting was the meeting that Kanki had with his men on the first night, because we find out a couple different things here about what could possibly be happening in the future. So one thing they were talking about was Riboku showing up with a large force, and that would be something that they wouldn't be able to stand up to. But another thing they talked a lot about, which Riboku could use to his advantage, is the fact that all these little armies don't seem to work together. And Kokuo even said that if they were to work together, they'd be more of a problem. There's actually another scenario in which maybe Riboku doesn't actually come down with a large force, but if he actually sends maybe a small detachment with a group of leaders in there that could organize these smaller armies into more of a cohesive unit to actually put up a stronger fight. But either way this pans out, we know that Riboku has something in store for Kanki and his army. And last but not least, we finally get to see one of the monster trio elevated to the level of general. And of course they're doing this temporary general thing, but we all know that once you reach a certain level, there is no going backwards. Moutens is a general now and should be for the remainder of the series. Now the next big thing is to see how he handles all this responsibility, and also when the other two will find themselves elevated to general status. The way things are going right now, I think Ohan is actually going to be the next one to progress. And it's going to be interesting to see how the dynamic between Ohan and Ousens is moving forward. Because I actually believe in this arc, or maybe even the next arc, we're actually going to get some sort of emotional scene where Ohan is actually able to break down some of these emotional barriers of his father. But we will have to wait and see, won't we? But anyway, guys, that was my review for this week. Let me know what you guys thought of the chapter in the comment section below. Leave a like if you liked the video. Feel free to share, comment, and subscribe. Peace out.